The first time the ships came, the people of Earth did not raise their weapons. They raised their eyes. For centuries, humanity had dreamed of neighbors among the stars, of silver-winged vessels crossing the heavens, bearing greetings and wisdom. When the sky burned with the light of colossal ships descending through the atmosphere, billions watched with breathless awe. Hope rippled across nations like a new dawn. But hope, as history would later record, was only the first mistake. The visitors called themselves the Xeroth, though even the name was distorted by the limits of translation. Their ships were leviathans, smooth obsidian black as if carved from the silence of space itself. They came not with banners of peace but with commands that rang like iron. Surrender resources, surrender obedience, surrender the future. Human leaders, shaken yet determined, attempted dialogue. The Xeroth had no patience for voices weaker than their own. When a council of nations refused to hand over the oceans of Earth for harvest, the aliens gave their answer not in words, but in fire. Entire coastlines burned under weapons that split the sky with unnatural lightning. Cities vanished, swallowed by energy storms. In that first week, more lives were lost than in all the wars of the last century. Humanity staggered, stunned by the sudden cruelty of their long-awaited visitors. And yet, amid despair, something ancient stirred. Ilara Morgan was there when the first ship tore through the clouds over Madrid. She was not a soldier, merely an astrophysicist, a dreamer who had devoted her life to searching the stars for voices that would answer humanity's loneliness. She had imagined handshakes, shared discoveries, bridges between worlds. Instead, she stood in the rubble of her university, clutching the charred remains of her research, and whispered a vow. If they believe us weak, they will learn how strong we become when the world breaks. Ilara's words were not shouted, not recorded, but they were the first ember of a fire that would spread. As weeks passed, Earth learned the true weight of defiance. Armies shattered. Nations crumbled. Families were torn apart, and yet scattered across mountains, deserts, hidden valleys, and broken streets, survivors whispered to one another. They passed messages scrawled on walls, encoded in radio bursts carved into memory. Do not yield. The Xeroth did not understand humanity's stubbornness. To them, resistance was wasteful. Entire species across the galaxy had already bent their knees. Why should this fragile world be different? Yet again and again the alien struck, and again small groups of humans clawed their way out of the ashes. Ilara, wandering among these survivors, found herself changing. She had once sought the beauty of stars. Now she sought the strength in human faces, the hollow-eyed child who still hummed lullabies for his lost mother, the farmer who shared his last bread with strangers, the soldier who stood guard though her rifle was broken. And in every face, Ilara saw the same truth. Humanity might bleed, but it did not bow. Word by word, camp by camp, she began to speak. She told them of old human legends, of ages when empires thought mankind powerless, yet the powerless had risen. She spoke of fire carried through darkness, of how survival itself was defiance. People listened, not because she promised victory, but because she reminded them who they were. And so the ember grew. In hidden forests, engineers began building crude weapons from the ruins. In mountain caves, scholars whispered strategies. Across oceans, radio signals flickered with coded hope. Humanity's strength had never been its machines nor its armies. It had always been something quieter, more merciless, the refusal to vanish. And high above, the Xeroth warlords, secure in their thrones of steel, began to feel a tremor of something they had not known in generations. Uncertainty, because beneath their ships, Earth was no longer waiting for mercy. Earth was preparing to rise. The Xeroth warlords could not understand why humanity resisted. Resistance in their eyes was foolishness. History told them that when they descended upon new worlds, species bent quickly, eager to survive. Yet humanity clung to defiance like it was oxygen itself. The first embers of rebellion flickered in hidden corners. Small victories, whispers of courage, spread faster than fire through dry grass. Ilara Morgan moved between the camps as a shadow and a voice. She was no general, no soldier, but she carried something rarer than weapons, belief. When she spoke by firelight, men and women leaned closer. Her voice was quiet, steady, filled with both grief and steel. "They think we are broken," she told them one night, her face lit by the flames of a ruined village. "But broken things cut sharper than whole ones. We bleed, yes, but every drop carves a warning. Humanity will not bow." Her words stitched themselves into the hearts of the survivors. People who had lost everything found themselves clenching their fists again, lifting their heads, daring to whisper plans. Across the shattered remains of London, a man named Daniel Reeves gathered a small band of fighters. He had once been a pilot, but now he flew no machines. Instead, he led people through the underground tunnels, striking at the aliens' patrols with stolen explosives and blades forged from scrap. To the Xeroth, they were gnats. To the survivors, they were sparks in the dark. Daniel and Alara met in the ruins of a library where dust and ash clung to shelves like mourning veils. She had come seeking maps of old sewer lines. He had come for the same. When their eyes met across the silence, it was as though two currents of fire collided. "You're the one they whisper about," Daniel said, lowering his weapon but not his guard. "The voice that gives people courage." "And you're the one who keeps the whispers alive," Alara replied. From that night onward, they worked together. Where Alara sowed hope, Daniel forged it into action. Their bond was not romance, it was something deeper, more urgent. It was the shared knowledge that humanity's soul depended on those willing to carry it forward. The Xeroth tightened their grip. They began hunting the resistors with brutal efficiency, sending machines that walked on four legs, their claws glowing with plasma heat. Villages were burned not for resources but to break the will of survivors. But still, humans endured. A boy named Aaron, no older than 12, carried a radio transmitter across mountains to link two resistance groups. A grandmother in Brazil taught fighters how to use old mining tunnels as ambush points. In Africa, desert tribes hid entire convoys of refugees beneath shifting dunes. Everywhere the aliens looked, they saw ashes. But inside the ashes, humanity's ember still glowed. Alara found herself changing. The quiet scientist who once searched the stars with wide eyes was gone. In her place stood a woman who carried the voices of thousands. She kept journals, recording names of the fallen, not as numbers but as people. Every time she read them aloud by firelight, she felt the survivors' eyes sharpen with resolve. "They think us fragile," she said one night, her hand pressed over the battered notebook. "But fragility is what makes us fierce. Glass may shatter, but the shards cut deep." Daniel, leaning nearby, nodded. "Then let's make them bleed." The Xeroth underestimated something vital. They thought humanity's strength was in armies, in cities, in the machines now lying in ruins. But Earth's true strength was never in monuments. It was in the hearts of its people, and hearts are hardest to conquer. The aliens began to whisper among themselves. Reports carried up their towering ships spoke of ambushes, sabotage, weapons fashioned from scraps but used with terrifying precision. They had seen defiance before, but never like this. These humans fought not for survival alone, but for dignity, for a fire within that could not be extinguished. And for the first time in countless campaigns, the Xeroth warlords paused. Humanity, battered and bloodied, was still standing. And in the silence of their command halls, the aliens trembled, though they did not yet know why. The resistance was no longer scattered whispers. It was a living fire spreading across continents. What began as desperate survival now sharpened into strategy. Humanity, once reeling from devastation, was learning to strike back. Daniel Reeves led one of the first coordinated assaults. His band of fighters had grown into a network, supplied by farmers, mechanics, and families who risked everything. With Alara's words guiding them, they attacked not with brute force but with cunning. The Xeroth relied on towering supply towers, great monoliths that drew Earth's water upward into their ships. These towers were heavily guarded, their shields glowing like dark suns. But Daniel studied their patterns, where patrols moved when the machines faltered. One night, under a sky fractured by stars, he led his fighters to the base of one such tower. Explosives strapped to stolen hoverbikes thundered forward, lighting the dark. Human fighters moved like shadows through the ruins, striking weak points and vanishing before the alien machines could react. When the tower finally erupted in a column of fire, the night sky itself seemed to cheer. For the first time, Xeroth warships recorded a significant loss. And for the first time, survivors laughed. Not out of joy, but out of fierce disbelief. Humanity could hurt them. Alara was there when the news spread. She stood in a broken marketplace in Italy, her voice carried through a crackling radio. Survivors pressed close, their eyes bright with something almost forgotten: hope. "They bleed," she said, her voice firm, carrying across airwaves. "They bleed just as we do. Do you see now? They are not gods. They are not unshakable. They are only conquerors, and conquerors fall." The people erupted in cheers, not loud but sharp like sparks leaping from a fire. The Xeroth warlords were not silent. Rage pulsed through their fleets. To lose even a single tower to a primitive world was an insult they could not bear. They responded with thunder, leveling entire regions in retaliation. Villages were erased, forests scorched, mountains cracked, yet the cycle had already shifted. For every blow the Xeroth struck, humanity's resolve only grew harder. A girl named Lara carried coded messages in the seams of her clothing, slipping past alien patrols with fearless eyes. A mechanic named Jonah turned abandoned trains into battering rams. Doctors without hospitals learned to heal with scraps, their hands steady even as bombs fell. Every act of survival became rebellion. Every day alive was a victory. One evening, Alara sat with Daniel in the ruins of an old cathedral. Candles burned between them, casting long shadows on the broken stone. "Do you ever think," Daniel asked quietly, "that we're just buying time before the end?" Alara looked at him, her face carved by firelight and sorrow. "Yes," she admitted. "But sometimes time is all a flame needs to become a blaze." Daniel studied her, and for the first time in months he smiled. The Xeroth were beginning to see it. This resistance was not simply scattered humans clawing for survival. It was unity, growing stronger with each wound inflicted. The warlords had counted on fear to shatter them. Instead, fear welded them together. Inside their colossal ships, the Xeroth argued. Some demanded extermination, a final strike to end the humans once and for all. Others, more cautious, warned that such destruction might waste the resources they came to harvest. But all of them, in quiet moments, shared an unspoken thought. This world is unlike the others. When the second supply tower fell in the deserts of Africa, the warlords trembled. Not because of the tower itself, but because of what followed. Hundreds of villages erupted in rebellion that same day, as though humanity had one beating heart. The Xeroth had awakened something they had not prepared for, something merciless, something defiant. For the first time, they were not hunters. For the first time, they felt the shadow of prey that fights back. The rebellion was no longer a scatter of sparks. It was a constellation. From the ruins of Europe to the deserts of Africa, from the jungles of South America to the icy reaches of Siberia, humanity was moving with one voice, though no single flag. But unity needed more than whispers. It needed guidance, a hand to shape chaos into strength. It was Daniel Reeves who first suggested it. He and Alara stood on a cliffside overlooking a valley scarred by alien fire. Smoke rose like black rivers into the sky. Survivors picked through the wreckage below, gathering what they could. "They've underestimated us," Daniel said. "But scattered victories won't win this war. We need to connect every ember. We need one command." Alara nodded slowly. "A hidden council," she murmured. "Not to rule, but to bind. To give every fighter, every family, a place in the whole." And so, beneath the ruins of an old mountain observatory, a command was born. It was not a government, not an army. It was something uniquely human, messy, stubborn, bound not by titles but by will. They called it the Concord of Ashes. The Concord spread its influence through coded signals carried by radios, drones salvaged from scrap, even carved messages hidden in plain sight. Leaders from shattered nations and nameless villages alike lent their voices. Farmers spoke beside soldiers. Children carried messages with the same weight as generals. Alara became the voice of the conquered. Daniel became its shield. And together, they turned scattered flames into a firestorm. The Xeroth, meanwhile, were divided. High in their orbiting command vessel, the warlord Vaith watched Earth with cold eyes. His kind had crushed empires, bent species older and stronger than humanity to their knees. Yet this world defied him. "This is not resistance," snarled one of his generals. "This is contagion. Every act of defiance spreads. If we do not excise it, it will consume the harvest." "Consume us," another whispered. The chamber fell silent. The word lingered like a shadow. For the first time, the Xeroth considered the possibility, not of losing resources, but of losing themselves. The Conquered's first great act was not destruction, but creation. In hidden workshops, mechanics and scientists joined hands. They forged weapons from wreckage, stitched armor from scavenged steel, and even hacked fragments of alien technology into crude but potent tools. A boy in Canada discovered how to overload the Xeroth's scanners with bursts of sound. A woman in India learned to crack their encrypted signals using nothing but salvaged computers. Each invention was shared, carried by the Conquered's network. Humanity had no single genius, no flawless technology. What it had was something the Xeroth could not fathom. Millions of minds working together, not for conquest, but for survival. Ilara carried the weight of voices on her shoulders. Every day, more names filled her journals. Fallen fighters, lost children, families who gave their lives to keep hope alive. Some nights she wept quietly alone, yet when dawn came, her voice was steady once more. "We are ashes," she told the Concorde through the radio waves. "But ashes feed the soil. From ashes, forests rise. From ashes, we rise." The Xeroth struck harder and raged. They unleashed new weapons. Machines that crawled like beasts, airships that rained fire, storms summoned to scorch the land. But each strike seemed to harden humanity further. Daniel led raids that cut deep into enemy lines, slipping through shadows and striking where least expected. Survivors cheered not only his victories, but his return, because every time he came back alive, it meant the flame still burned. And as the months dragged on, something remarkable happened. Humanity stopped speaking of if they would survive. They began to speak of when Vaith, in the high command chamber, slammed his clawed fist against the console. They do not understand their place. But in the silence that followed, another general whispered, almost to himself, "Perhaps it is we who have forgotten ours." The words unsettled them all. On Earth, in a valley hidden by mountains, the Conquered gathered once more. The leaders sat in a circle of firelight, their faces marked by exhaustion and hope alike. Ilara stood among them, her voice strong. "This is no longer survival," she declared. "This is reclamation. They came to strip us of our future. Instead, we will carve theirs away. Humanity will not vanish into silence. Humanity will roar." And the firelight seemed to tremble as if the earth itself agreed. The Conquered of Ashes had been born in silence, hidden beneath broken mountains and ruined cities. But now its voice reached the heavens. Humanity was no longer only resisting, they were preparing to strike the sky itself. It began with whispers of an impossible dream. For months, survivors had scavenged pieces of downed Xeroth drones and gutted war machines. Engineers, mechanics, and children with grease-stained hands worked side by side in hidden workshops. What they built was crude, clumsy, and dangerous, but it was human. They called it the Iron Wing, a fleet of patched-together ships, forged from alien wreckage and human stubbornness. They were not sleek or perfect, but each was a defiant scream hurled into the void. Daniel Reeves was the first to fly one. His fighter roared upward from a desert canyon, patched metal rattling, engines screaming in protest. Yet when he broke through the clouds and saw the looming shadow of a Xeroth patrol craft, something inside him surged. "Humanity rises," Daniel whispered, gripping the controls. The battle that followed was chaos. The Xeroth ship dwarfed his own, armed with weapons far beyond anything the Iron Wing carried. But Daniel was human, and humans fought with unpredictability. He feigned retreat, dived into clouds, then twisted back with a suicide run that should have been impossible. His cannons spat fire, and the alien craft exploded in a storm of light that shook the heavens. When his battered fighter limped home, entire camps erupted in cheers. The sky was no longer theirs alone. Humanity had claimed a piece of it back. Elara watched the celebrations with wet eyes. She stood in the heart of a mountain cave, listening to survivors dance, sing, and laugh for the first time in months. Yet even in joy, she felt the weight pressing deeper on her chest. Hope was fragile. She knew this. But fragile things could endure when held together by enough hands. That night, she spoke to the Concord through the radio. They believed the sky was their fortress. Tonight we proved it is our battlefield. Let the stars bear witness we are not afraid to rise. The Xeroth command did not take the loss lightly. To them, the destruction of a patrol craft by primitives was beyond insult. It was infection. Warlord Vaith stood before his generals, his voice low and dangerous. These humans twist wreckage into weapons. They corrupt the order of conquest. If this contagion spreads, others may follow their example. The generals shifted uneasily. For centuries, no world had dared resist this long, and now for the first time a conquered species had struck the conquerors in their own sky. It was no longer about resources. It was about fear. More Iron Wing ships took flight. Each one was a miracle of human ingenuity and desperation. They were ugly, unpredictable machines prone to failure. But when flown by human hands, they became something more. Pilots risked everything, their lives burning like brief flares across the heavens. Some never returned, but each loss carved another scar into the Xeroth fleet, and with every scar, humanity's legend grew. One night, Daniel sat with Elara by the wreckage of a downed Iron Wing craft. Its pilot had died in the flames, but not before ramming her ship into a Xeroth cruiser. Crippling it, she knew what it would cost, Daniel murmured, his hand resting on the blackened metal. Elara's gaze was steady, though tears glistened in her eyes. She knew what it was worth. The Xeroth tightened their defenses, but paranoia gnawed at them. They patrolled the skies relentlessly, yet the humans always found cracks, always found ways to strike, to survive, to rise. In the hidden chambers of the conquered, Elara stood once more before her people. "We have taken the sky," she declared, her voice echoing. "But this war will not end here. The stars are their home, but they are also ours to claim. And when we rise beyond this world, let the galaxy see what humanity is. Let them know we do not yield." The chamber thundered with voices, fists striking the air. A chorus of defiance. Above them in orbit, the Xeroth warlords trembled in silence. For the first time, they were not looking down on prey. For the first time, they were looking up at predators. The Iron Wing had been born from desperation. By now it had grown into something more, a symbol. Every patched hull, every trembling engine carried the will of humanity higher, until the sky no longer belonged to the Xeroth alone. But the true war was above the atmosphere, in the cold silence of orbit. That was where the Xeroth fleet hung like a crown of black daggers, draining Earth's oceans, its forests, its life. To free the world, humanity would have to fight not just on the ground, but among the stars themselves. The plan was madness. In the hidden chambers of the conquered, Daniel Reeves laid it out across a scarred table, maps and star charts scrawled with chalk. "We strike at their heart," he said. "Not their patrols, not their towers, the fleet." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. The Xeroth command ships were mountains in the sky, bristling with weapons beyond imagination. To face them was suicide. Elara stood beside Daniel, her hand resting on his map. Her voice, calm but unshakable, cut through the fear. "They call us fragile. They believe us small. Let them learn the truth that when humans rise, even mountains fall." Silence followed. Then one by one, voices agreed. The conquered would rise. The night of the assault came like thunder. From hidden valleys and abandoned airfields, the Iron Wing launched. Ships roared upward in waves, patched wings glowing as engines pushed beyond their limits. Each pilot carried no illusions. They were flying into the jaws of giants. But none hesitated. Daniel led the first wave. As Earth's curve fell away beneath him, he felt the weight of history pressing against his chest. For every voice they silenced, he whispered into the comms. For every child they burned, fly true. and the Xeroth fleet responded with overwhelming force. Their cruisers opened fire, beams of plasma tearing the void with blinding light. Dozens of human ships burned instantly, vanishing into silence. But for every one that fell, another surged forward. The Iron Wing did not fight with order. They fought with chaos, with the human gift of turning desperation into creativity. Pilots flew into blind angles, crashed into enemy shields, detonated explosives at suicidal range. Daniel's voice carried across the comms, fierce and steady. "We are not here to survive, we are here to show them who we are." Deep in the fleet's shadow, a small group of human ships carried something more dangerous than weapons. Stolen Xeroth codes, cracked by survivors who had spent sleepless months studying their language of machines. Ilara had helped carry those codes, memorized and guarded. From the ground, she now directed the second wave. Her voice was steady in the pilot's ears, guiding them through the chaos. "Now," she commanded, her tone like iron. "Strike their heart." And the codes unlocked what none thought possible. The shields of a Xeroth command cruiser faltered, flickered, then fell. Daniel dove straight for it. Plasma fire streaked past, tearing chunks from his hull, but he did not waver. Behind him, dozens of Iron Wing fighters followed. Together, they poured fire into the cruiser's exposed flank. The ship shuddered, cracked, then erupted in a storm of light so fierce it blinded the stars. Humanity had slain a giant. The cheers erupted across the comms, across hidden camps on Earth, across every survivor who heard the news. For the first time in history, humanity had destroyed one of the Xeroth's great war machines. But the victory came with a cost. Half the Iron Wing did not return. The sky rained debris, human and alien alike. On the ground, Ilara read names into her journal until her voice broke. Yet even through grief, she felt something unshakable, a shift. The Xeroth were no longer untouchable, and the galaxy, listening from afar, would hear of it. In the silent halls of their fleet, the Xeroth warlords gathered. Rage thundered in their voices, but beneath it, something colder stirred, fear. "This world," one whispered, "should have been dust." "And yet," said another, staring at the place where the cruiser had fallen, "it rises like fire." On Earth, Ilara stood before the survivors once more, her voice hoarse but fierce. "We have shown them the sky is no longer theirs. The stars belong to us too, and we will not stop, not until they tremble, not until they fall." The survivors roared back, voices echoing like thunder across the broken world, and high above, in the black silence of space, the Xeroth fleet, mighty, merciless, unyielding, shivered. For humanity had risen merciless and defiant, and the war was no longer conquest, it was survival, it was vengeance, it was the roar of a species that would not bow. The battle in orbit had changed everything. For the first time, the Xeroth were not merely opposed, they were wounded. Their towering war machine, their illusion of invincibility, had cracked. And when giants bleed, the world takes notice. Whispers carried across the galaxy. Other species, long enslaved, long silenced, heard the rumor of a fragile world that had struck the conquerors. They dared not act yet, but in the shadows of forgotten systems, hope stirred like the first breath of dawn. On Earth, the conquered of ashes prepared for the final gambit. Humanity had no illusions. They could not defeat the Xeroth in open battle, not with steel alone. But they could strike a wound so deep it would never heal. Their target was the crown of Vaith, the command vessel that loomed above the planet, vast as a city, the heart of the invasion. To destroy it was impossible, but to cripple it, that would shatter the Xeroth's grip forever. Ilara Morgan stood before the fighters in the hidden valley where the Iron Wing was being readied for its most desperate flight. Her journal lay open in her hands, filled with names of the fallen. "They think we are alone," she said, her voice carrying into the cold air. "But every name in this book flies with us. Every voice they silenced becomes our weapon. Today we rise not only for Earth, but for every world they have broken. And when we strike, let the stars themselves hear humanity's roar." The ascent was fire and fury. Dozens of Iron Wing fighters tore through the sky, followed by great transports laden with explosives, codes, and stolen alien tech. Daniel Reeves led the vanguard, his eyes steady on the colossal shadow above. The Xeroth were ready. The crown of Vaith bristled with weapons, its shields blazing like suns. Cruisers swarmed to defend it, unleashing storms of plasma that turned the void into fire. The Iron Wing dove into chaos. Ships exploded, human and alien alike, filling space with burning debris. Yet through it all, the human pilots pressed forward, each life spent like a torch thrown at the darkness. Ilara, directing from the ground, spoke into the comms with a voice steady as stone. "Strike the seams. Overload their shields. Do not relent." One by one, the codes cracked their systems. The Crown's shields flickered, faltered, then flared again. But the humans pressed harder, wave after wave. Daniel broke through the final wall of fire. His fighter was burning, alarm screaming, but he did not hesitate. Before him loomed the Crown's core, pulsing with energy, the heart of the invader. "This is for Earth," he whispered, and then louder, his voice blazing across the comms, "For humanity." He drove his ship forward, a comet of flame and fury. The impact tore through the vessel's heart. The crown of Vaith shuddered, split, then erupted in an explosion so vast it lit the sky brighter than dawn. On Earth, survivors watched as the heavens blazed. The shadow that had loomed for so long was gone. Silence fell across the land, broken only by gasps, then cries, then roars of triumph. Humanity had slain its tyrant. The Xeroth fleet faltered. Leaderless, shaken, they reeled. Some retreated into the blackness of space. Others, consumed by fury, fell into disarray. The invasion was broken. And in that moment, the balance of the galaxy shifted. Ilara stood alone that night, gazing at the stars. She clutched her journal, heavy with names, and whispered Daniel's among them. Tears fell, but her eyes did not falter. "They will remember us," she said softly, as though speaking to the stars themselves. "Not as prey, not as victims, but as the fire that refused to die." Far away, in the hidden corners of the galaxy, enslaved peoples whispered the name of Earth. They whispered of a species that had bled, endured, and risen merciless and defiant. And in the shattered halls of the Xeroth, the warlords trembled, for they knew this truth. Once humanity had roared, the sound would never fade. The galaxy had changed forever, and humanity, scarred yet unbroken, stood at its dawn.